Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about Carl Jung. Now, you all might be a little confused why I might want to talk about Carl Jung, but the truth is that Jung has really interested me over the past decade, particularly as I returned back to school. I had hoped to study a master's, and when I arrived at my old university, things had changed and not for the better. And one of the saddest things for me, I think, was realizing that the department was just not interested in the same aspects of literature and approaches to literature that I was interested in. There are many different ways of approaching literature, and the reality is that right now the paradigm is largely controlled by something called critical race theory. Psychoanalytical theory is simply just not the thing. So I had to really study Carl Jung on my own. And today I want to introduce Carl Jung, who he was, some very basic notes about him. Then I will be doing a video diving into two important concepts or terms that he introduced. And I will be using these two videos as a springboard to comment on Final Fantasy XIV, on Avatar: The Last Airbender, on so many other things, including Naruto. So let's begin now with the basic introduction of Carl Jung. So Carl Jung, born 1875, died in 1961. He was a Swiss person, a Swiss man, a psychologist and psychiatrist. He was the founder of analytic psychology as a response to Freud's psychoanalysis. During his lifetime and work, Jung developed the concepts of extroversion, introversion, archetypes, the collective unconscious, and in so doing, he impacted psychiatry, religion, literature, and other related fields of study. Initially, Jung collaborated with Freud, but they parted ways because Freud got more focused on, sexuality and sex, while Jung was looking for something more general and universal. He was more focused on the concepts of spirituality and the consciousness, as well as myth making. What is really important to know about Carl is that he believed that all of our experiences should be respected and included. And this meant including those parts of ourselves that we don't really like or that we know are dangerous, our shadow aspects, and all of those destructive qualities that come with them. Jung also valued spiritual experience as a mode of therapy and a path to wholeness. He advocated self-awareness and attunement, and focused on individuation and integration of the self as an important key to individual wholeness and community wholeness. As a result, Jung respected the role of dreams and visions, and he would often talk about how dreams and visions connect us to the collective unconscious and allow us to explore those parts of ourselves that we would rather keep hidden. Jungian psychotherapy and analysis involves ideas such as individuation and the self, the shadow, the personal and the collective unconscious, complexes and archetypes, the transcendent function, the theory of opposites, the self-regulating purposive psyche, the theory of types, of course, as we mentioned before, introversion and extroversion, and how dreams help us basically explore and unravel those parts of ourselves that we haven't really dealt with. Something that really stood out to me was the idea of archetypes. So we often will refer to these as Jungian archetypes, but honestly, Jung would say that these archetypes belong to everyone. Archetypes are generally images or themes that arise from the collective unconscious. These archetypes will show up in art, faith, literature, and dreams, kind of like a pattern of thought or behavior, if you will. If we just let ourselves go and don't really think about what we are doing, oftentimes our hands or our stories will return to very familiar tropes. Jung believed this was the result of the evolution of our consciousness. So in some ways, these archetypes are fossils, if you will, of our evolutionary past within our psyche. These archetypes are often symbolic, and they are used to describe various things. So I may at some point in the future talk about the tyrannical father, the devouring mother, the trickster, the shadow. All of these are archetypes. There's the self, the persona, and last but not least, anima and animus. A lot of these archetypes are used by other psychologists to sort of define parts of the self. And in some ways, we could say that these archetypes are present everywhere within our entertainment. However, Jung wasn't just going to be talking about archetypes. He also was very interested in psychology and how humans behaved. As a result, he did do a lot of theory work on types, particularly introversion and extroversion. But other types that arose from his work were very familiar type binaries, such as thinking versus feeling, sensing versus intuition. This might all sound very familiar. That's because Myers-Briggs is very lightly based on Jung's concepts. At the end of the day, Jung was all about helping people. He believed that everyone is on a path to individuation. Individuation is a state where you are aware of yourself and you integrate all the different parts of your personality into your selfhood to actualize and reach potential. There is your self, which is your personhood, your complete being. There's your persona, what we present to the world. There's your shadow, the parts of yourself that you reject or can't recognize. And then there's your anima or animus, depending on whether you're male or female, which is the mirror of biological sex. When you have integrated all of these properly and in a healthy way, you will achieve individuation. This is a lifelong journey, according to Jung. So you can start today. I think the great takeaway, the most important thing, is that Jung's ideas have not been as popular as Freud. And there is a very big reason for this. Now, some people might think it's because he did not write clearly and simply. And so your average student or your average layman is not going to really understand what Jung is saying. In many ways, Freud was able to market his ideas better. It's also probably because Jung was a bit more mystical and obscure. And when you are dealing with something more mystical and obscure, it's really imperative that you are very clear about what you're explaining. And if you are just too difficult to understand, people are going to not really take the time to dig in. These are all very valid reasons for why Jung simply may not be front and center in academic discussion. But I think there's something more going on than simply because Jung was complicated and hippy-dippy. I think Jung was sidelined on purpose because his ideas opposed popular Marxist thought that was circulating in universities around the same time. I mean, take a look at this website that I found. You can see how much information they are talking about when it comes to every other kinds of literary field. But when it comes to talking about Jung's psychoanalytical theories, he doesn't get almost any coverage at all. Why is that? Is it really because he's so hard to understand? Or because he's mystical and spiritual? Kind of? Sort of? I don't think so. I think it's because Jung ultimately believed that humans are basically built to individuate, and that when they individuate, they become who they're supposed to be. And basically, this means that they will not just be moral, strong, the best individuals they can be, but they will also engage in society in a very positive and healthy way. In this one website, Razuel sums it up. When we engage with the process of individuation, we usually realize that we are imperfect beings and that we need others to make our life richer, more fulfilling, more worthwhile. On the other hand, we also come to realize that we hold a greater share of individual responsibility in crafting our life, and that the choices we make are ours and ours alone. Self-development is not an easy task, but Jung believed that at one point or another, everyone will be called upon to explore their psyche, willingly or not. He thus advised to pay attention to the signs and symptoms, and to prepare ourselves to tackle the task rather than risk being caught unprepared and getting lost in the turmoil. Jung and a lot of the people who studied beneath him and worked alongside him as colleagues believed that the individual is a microcosm of society, and society, in a sense, is a microcosm of the cosmos. So when every individual is focused on doing their best, then society itself will also become a healthy organism. And the imbalances we currently see in society isn't because society is bad. It's because the individuals making up the society have gone off the rails. Jung touches on it in Man and His Symbols. And I also think one of Jung's, Man and His Symbols is actually an anthology. So one of the writers for it, I think it was Henderson, talks about how society has just gone nutty. But could have been Maria von France as well. I'll have to do another video on that. But basically, the idea is that if we are seeing imbalances in society as a whole, it's because individuals have lost their connection, they've lost a path to wholeness, they've lost the ability to individuate and become self-aware, and they've lost a way of making meaning and making life meaningful. So maybe now you have an idea why Jung isn't really popular in universities. Remember that cultural Marxist theory and critical race theory is all about top-down approaches to fixing humans. And there's something to be said for institutionalizing laws and standards for behavior. Things like etiquette are all very helpful as a way to moderate human behavior. But we can't forget the importance of personal responsibility. And Jung is very much about confronting issues within society on the basis of the individual. When all of the individuals are working together to be the best individuals they can be, that is when society will formulate in a more healthy way and human behavior will swing toward the positive. And that's where I think Jung just isn't popular, is he? He's very much interested in people taking responsibility for themselves and working together to make society whole. And so that's why I think Jung has been sidelined, because the few smart people who understand Jung know that he is completely antithetical to what is going on today. When somebody in class tells me that, the patriarchy is ruining their lives, part of me that is fully in line with Jung wants to say, that might be the case, but what can you do with your life right here, right now, to make your own life better and to work with others to make society better? So in some ways, I think Jung has a lot of wisdom locked away. And although a lot of other people have favored Freud over Jung, I prefer Jung any day. I'm going to be using Jung's concepts on archetypes, archetypal energy, as well as the anima and the animus. In the next few videos, I'm going to be particularly focusing on the anima and the animus. These are some very fascinating concepts related to male and female qualities, as well as how these two sexes share psychological bonds and how this might affect how we behave, as well as basically manifest itself in literature or media that we are watching. Because when it comes to wholeness, we need to understand where we're starting from in order to know where we need to go. And the anima-animus discussion, I think, is one of the more fascinating things to have and to analyze. And I believe that there are many stories out there that are actually touching on these themes. And that is why we are having almost religious experiences interacting with these particular media. It's because it's touching on something so fundamental to our being that our souls recognize it as being truth. So I'm going to end it here. This is Carl Jung 101. If you want to know more about Carl Jung, you can take a look at the works cited list I will be showing at the end of this video. I will provide it in the description below. And I recommend reading some of his books. Try Man and His Symbols. And that one, I think, is very fascinating. If you'd like me to break down Man and His Symbols for you all in more detail so you know what's going on in that book, let me know, and I'll see about sharing some of my notes with you all, because I did take extensive notes for that book. Well, that's all for today. Thank you for listening. Let me know down below if you know anything about Jung and what you would like to know more. Take care.